When you harness the power of a story, you can move people from confused to clear. Up next, you'll hear from someone who leverages the research behind storytelling to help leaders engage audiences and win. Best-selling author and communicator, she's the go-to expert for storytelling. To design a tomorrow worth talking about, storytelling bridges the gap between your customer and your product, bridging attention, influence, and transformation. Here to show us how, please welcome Kindra Hall.
I am so happy to be here with all of you watching from all over the world. As you heard in my introduction, my name is Kindra Hall, and yes, if you were to distill my title down to 2 words, it would probably be professional storyteller, which, I feel like we should get this out in the open right now. If you are thinking to yourself, that sounds made up, it is. I made up my job. I told my first story when I was 11 years old. And I don't know, maybe some of you can relate to this. Since that moment, this job has felt more like a calling. I became obsessed, shall we say, with stories. But it wasn't until a few years later that I discovered the true power of story for influence, which is what we're talking about here today for all of you as leaders. Until I was much older, I was 17 years old, and I was in physics class. Now, it was my senior year of high school, and I have to tell you, physics class was my favorite class, which might come as a surprise to you, coming from a storyteller. I never missed a physics class, not because I had any interest in physics, but because I adored Mr. Saresic. Yes, he was totally bald on the top of his head. He had this ring of salt and pepper around the sides. It was a good look. And I remember sitting in that front row of that physics classroom in the hard plastic chair, right? You remember, in the desk that kind of wraps around the side and squeezes you in, watching Mr. Saresic right on the chalkboard. He would like dance across the room and wondering how this guy could be so enthusiastic about something as awful as physics. It was mind-boggling to me. Now, unfortunately, as you might guess, my grades did not reflect my love of physics class. They were terrible. My test scores, abysmal. My lab notebook read more like a comic book than anything. It was bad. But at the very end of the semester, we all had to write a paper. Now, writing papers, that was in my wheelhouse, definitely something I could do. It was a 5-page paper on our favorite physics topic. How many of you have one of those? No, I didn't have one of those, so I made that up too. I chose the topic gravity. Seems sort of omnipresent, meant something different at 17 than it does in your early 40s, but nevertheless, I chose the topic gravity. I went to the library, which was this magical place. Some of you may remember you used to go to gather information. Do you remember how much time we spent learning the Dewey Decimal System, right? I really thought the Dewey Decimal System was going to play a bigger role in my life, but anyway, here we are. So I went to the library. I gathered everything there was to know about gravity. I came home the night before the paper was due, because that is always when we do our best work, isn't it, right? Just right at the very last minute, and I wrote my paper about gravity. Let me break it down for you. Things go up. And then, after a while, they come back down. I mean, it's a simple concept. If you think of it, worthy of 5 pages, I'm not entirely sure. And sure enough, right before the paper was due, I was done with my paper, and I had 4 pages. I was 1 whole page short. And I don't know about your high school, but at my high school, the only thing that mattered when it came to writing papers was how many pieces of paper had words on them. I was 1 whole page short, so you know what I did. I adjusted the font. Yes, I made it bigger. I tweaked the spacing, so it was like double. Now, this is an advanced technique. Margins. I squeezed those margins in, so it's just a thin. I knew that wasn't going to work. So at the very last minute, with no other options, I decided to cheat. You see, in high school, I was on the speech team. Yes, I was very popular, just like all of the speech and debate kids are. Story, don't laugh at that, it's true. Okay, so stories had worked really well on the speech team. I won a bunch of awards for it, so I wondered if perhaps it were a transferable skill, like maybe a story would work here. So I wrote a story of my love of roller coasters. I love turbulence on airplanes, okay? Everybody else grabs onto I put my hands up in the air, and I would wait all winter long so I could be one of the first ones to get into Valley Fair, which was the amusement park where I grew up, so I could be one of the first ones to get on Wild Thing. Now, Wild Thing was this big, green, twisted metal of a monster of a roller coaster, and you would sit in those roller coaster seats and feel the heavy bar come down onto your lap. And the first thing you did on Wild Thing was go straight up in the air, and the second thing you did was come straight back down, and that feeling you get in your stomach as it drops. My friends, that feeling is the result of gravity. So I took that story, it was about half a page long, and I put it at the front of my physics paper. I then put all the information, the science in the middle, and at the end of the paper, I came back to the story with that last half a page. I saved this paper. So this is the actual end of my physics paper from 1999. So the next time I get on Wild Thing and I feel the heavy bar come down onto my lap, I will look to the sky. Imagine Sir Newton and the apple that fell on his head. And I will thank him. That paper was 5 pages long. So I handed the paper in. I held my breath. I'm pretty sure Mr. Suresik was gonna see right through this. Clearly I had cheated. But when I got the paper back, on the front of it was a big red A. And on the back, Mr. Suresik wrote one of the most important things I would ever hear. One of the reasons I am here with all of you today. He said, excellent application of information to real life stories. It turns out telling a story wasn't cheating. Telling a story is exactly what that gap needed. It brought the information to life. It made the message matter. Now, I know what is at stake for all of you is much greater than gold stars and good grades on paper, right? But I know as leaders, whether it's a corporate environment, whether it's nonprofit, whether you're leading your home, or at least you're trying to, that you've sensed these one-page gaps in understanding of the value of an initiative, in connection between you and your team or the world as a whole. And what I want to teach you to do today is to fill those gaps, not with more information, but rather with stories. Stories that make that message matter, stories that influence. And the good news is, these are stories you already have. You only have to know why and how to tell them. That is what I'm teaching you here today. Are you excited or what? Good news. Also, you don't have to be excited. I have enough excitement for the possibility of your stories to go around, okay? So here's how the rest of our time together is going to break down. First, in order for you to harness the power of your stories, it's important that you understand why storytelling works so well. What's happening when we hear stories? What's happening when we tell stories? Because as a leader, great storytelling is going to require an investment on your part to develop this skill, and I want you to know that investment is worth it. From there, I'm going to give you a few foolproof storytelling strategies so you can find and craft more compelling stories as soon as you leave this room. And finally, 2 very important things I want to leave you with. All right, let's do this. First, why does storytelling work so well? Well, there are many reasons, but I think we should start here. Stories are our human edge. We were born to tell stories. It is part of our biology. It is part of our DNA. It is the reason you are here today. It is through our stories that we're able to connect with people, that we're able to build a trust and relationships, that we're able to talk about complex concepts and bring them into context. If you're ever sensing a gap between people, that means a story needs to be told. Now, I'm not just gonna tell you this, we're gonna do a little audience participation so that you can practice. Here's what I need you to do. Turn to your neighbor, whether you're in this room or you're watching from at home, and say, good morning. That is not the exercise. Don't get your hopes up, okay? But now you all have a partner. And for my overachievers who turned around and said good morning to everyone, you're gonna have to choose one, okay? We need a few partners. And if you're watching this solo, go ahead, take out a piece of paper and you can work on this on your own. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to turn to your partner, and we're not talking yet about telling a story. You don't have to tell a story, but I want you to tell your partner about the importance of perseverance. Now, as leaders, this is something you have to discuss from time to time, right? You need to be resilient. So turn to your neighbor just for a few seconds. Tell them about the importance of perseverance. Go. Good. Switch if you haven't already. Switch. All right, nice work. Everyone, come on back to me. Come on back to me if you're watching. How many of you, show of hands, have learned something nice about perseverance? Have you learned about perseverance? How many of you have had to persevere before? Yes, we all have to persevere. Great job. I appreciate all that hard work. Now, I want you to turn to that exact same neighbor. You don't even have to choose someone new. This time, I want you to tell them about the first time or the worst time you fell off your bike. Now, if you've never been on a bicycle before, for whatever reason, you could talk about the first day at a new job or the first time going to a new school and it was embarrassing and awkward, but the first time or the worst time you fell off your bike, go. All right, switch if you haven't already. Switch. All right, come on back to me. Come on back. You all lived happily ever after. Yes. Now, if you're listening right now, you can hear me and you're worried because I've lost complete control of the room. Know that this happens every time. Once they start telling their stories, they can't stop. But watch this. Give yourselves a round of applause. All right, now you have to stop. We got to keep going. But listen, you can always hear a few more stories happening, right? Okay, my friends, my leaders, let's talk about what just happened. Okay, now, I'm sure you could sense this if you're watching it from around the world, but let's talk about what happened in this room right now. Now, you're all very participatory. I completely appreciate you talking about perseverance, but did you notice as you're watching from various locations that when you started telling your stories, the volume in the room was 5 times louder. It was a dull roar in this room, right? And not only that, but the whole room started to move. You were leaving in and out, and just a lot of this, guys, that's not a good way. Lot of, and I should point out, the way that you laugh at each other's pain, there's something to that as well. We're going to discuss that another time. We often hear that leaders are responsible for the energy in the room, and you are, but what do you do? And now you know. You tell a story. You listen to a story because humans are more themselves when we are telling our stories. If you as a leader are trying to engage and build bridges and influence and lead, share your stories, change the energy in the room. Don't you feel like you know the person you're sitting next to a little bit better now after hearing their bicycle story? Yeah, don't you like them more? Unless you were like, no, that person is crazy. Okay, so that's fine. And one other small thing. Wouldn't it take just a small adjustment of your bicycle story to make it a story about the importance of perseverance? Unless that was the last time you were ever on a bicycle, and then yes, you'll have to find a different story. But make no mistake, stories are the human edge. Great leaders share stories, build bridges to fill in those gaps. Okay, the second reason storytelling is such an important skill as leaders is this. Stories are ultimately the thing that stick. It's what we remember. If you want to leave your legacy, be telling stories, and there's a reason for this. The storytelling process is a co-creative one. As I am telling you my story, for example, you're creating your own version of it in your mind. You're taking my words, yes, but you're adding your images, your emotion, your lived experience. And because you participate in the creation of that message, it lives within you and it will stay with you longer. Let me ask you, when I was telling you the story about physics class, how many of you pictured a high school classroom that you yourself used to sit in, right? Yes, yes. My roller coaster riders, how many of you were on the roller coasters? Yes, you're nodding your heads, you're raising your hands because I know what I'm doing up here. I don't know. I know that I am talking to humans, and as a result, you will meet me halfway and co-create that story together. Rudyard Kipling said it, if history were taught in the form of stories, it would never be forgotten. Leave your legacy. Tell your stories. And now the next question is how, okay? So let's talk about a few foolproof, this is a mouthful to say, nope, I'm not, you can see the slide, okay? Storytelling strategies. The storytelling process really breaks down into 3 parts. In order to tell them, you have to craft them, and then you have to find them. We're gonna talk about those first 2 here today, finding and crafting stories, and where the process often breaks down is right there at the beginning with finding stories. And make no mistake, this is not a matter of not having stories. You have more stories than you could ever tell. It's a matter of unlocking them. So I'd like to give you a few strategies to help you unlock the stories within you. The first one is this, and this is really important for all of you as leaders. I want you to make a list of your values. What are the things that matter to you? What is important to you? Or maybe your qualities as a leader or a burgeoning leader. What makes you worthy to guide other people, which, by the way, you all are. Maybe you make a list of your passions or, as we talked about today, your obsessions. Making a list is not where this exercise stops. I want you then to find a moment in your experience that illustrates that, where that value was an action or it was tested. Simply saying what those values are only gets you so far. If you want someone to understand the importance of that, tell them the story so they'll co-create it with you and it will live inside of them. The second thing I want you to know about finding stories is stories attach themselves to the nouns in our life, the people, the places, the things, the events. So if you're ever tasked with finding a story and you don't know where to start, make a list of nouns. So here's another one that you can use. Make a list of important people in your life. Write down their names. And as soon as you write those names down, it will unlock stories and memories. Now you'll notice, for any of you questioning whether or not you are a leader sitting in this room or watching this right here, right now, I could write one of the important people in my life as Mr. Suresik. Now, was he some grand hero with millions of followers? He was my high school physics teacher, and he changed my life. So keep that in mind. Write the nouns down, stories will reveal themselves. One last thing I want to mention about finding stories. And specifically, there are 2 people in this room I need to talk to. One is the person who's thinking, I have a big story. I have a hard story, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to tell it. And certainly give yourself grace, give yourself time, but also know that your story could be the exact story someone needs to start their own or survive the story they're in. Never underestimate the power of your story. And the second person I need to talk to is the person in this room who's thinking, I don't have a story. Who am I? Who am I to tell a story? And to you I say, think of the parables that have mattered to you. Think about the fact that I told the story about a high school physics classroom to start a presentation to a crowd of 80,000 people, okay? It's not the magnitude of a story that matters. It's the decision to tell a story. That is the decision a leader needs to make. All right, now let's talk briefly about crafting the story. You've likely heard that a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. That doesn't help you very much. From now on, I want you to think of your stories like this: normal, explosion, new normal. What was, what happened, and what is now possible as a result. Now, often we start right there in the middle with the thing that happened, and here are the results, but where the co-creative process happens is in that normal. You need to start there, build the case, draw them in. And then, of course, the next question is, well, what do I put in that normal? I want to give you 4 key components that my team of researchers identified as making a story more compelling, more memorable. Number 1, you need an identifiable character, a person that the listener, the audience, the human can identify and identify with. You need emotion in a story. And I would add something here: authentic emotion. It doesn't have to be about tragedy or glory or nothing in between. How many of you have gone through a myriad of emotions just trying to get here today, to sit in that room, right? These are the emotions that we as humans experience on a daily basis. Those emotions are valid, and they connect us all. Include a specific moment. Have them sitting right next to you in that physics classroom so that that co-creative process can start. And finally, specific strategic details. Let me ask you, how many of you remember the heavy bar of the roller coaster coming down on my lap? Yeah, do you remember that? Bonus question, how many times did I say it? Twice. Good, you didn't even realize this, but I know that by adding a strategic specific detail, your brain loves that, and it drives the co-creative process all the way home. Spoiler alert, I'm gonna say it one more time before the end of this presentation. These 4 components belong in that normal, and your story will be unforgettable. 2 final things I wanna leave you here with today, and the first one is this: the most important thing for you to remember, particularly when the story doesn't go as planned. How many of you have ever missed a goal, had something go sideways, have something go wrong? And in that moment of chaos, there's a lot of phrases that we can say to ourselves. God has a plan, this too shall pass, there's a reason for everything. The phrase that I like, in addition to all of those, is this: this is the middle of a story. And why I love this is because A, it gives us permission. Middles are messy. They're stressful. They're confusing. Middles of stories are what drives us to look at the spoiler alerts in our favorite movies or TV shows. It's what has us flip to the end of the book to see how it all turns out. Middles are supposed to feel like this. And I don't know about you, but sometimes that's a relief. And number 2, it opens the door for curiosity. Like, if this is the middle of a story, it's kind of tough, but I wonder how this whole thing is gonna turn out. I wonder who this character is and what they mean in my story. Who is the person I will become as this story continues? As leaders, when you face these challenges, maybe you're facing one right here today, always remind yourself, this is the middle of a story. The last thing I'll leave you with is the most important story any of us will ever tell. And that is the story we tell ourselves. All day, every day, you are telling yourself stories. It's happening without you even realizing it. And the truth of the matter is, they're not always nice, right? These are the stories that are there to keep us safe. They cause a doubt. They make us worse at what we do, or at the very least, make us feel miserable. These stories, these negative self-stories, add up to limiting beliefs that keep us frozen in place and keep us from achieving the greatness that you were all born to achieve. Here's the good news. You can choose which stories you tell yourself, and the choice of that story can change everything. I want to give you a small example from my own life. I mentioned one of my callings is to be a storyteller here with all of you, but my other calling is to be the wife of 15 years and counting. Hopefully there will be many more, okay? To my husband, Michael, and the mother of 2 middle school children. My son is going into 8th grade. He's 13, and he is still my sweet, sweet boy. And my daughter, almost 12, going into 7th grade, and she is a force of nature. That's what I call her. My mother calls her Karma. She's not wrong, and I love my life as a mother and a wife, and I'm sure you can tell I love what I get to do here. And there was a moment in time where I didn't think I could love both enough. That by pursuing this passion, this calling, this obsession, I'm here with you means I'm not home with them. And I had all of the stories. The pickups I missed, the field trips I didn't go on, right? The person, brings something to the holiday party and I always brought the plates. I didn't know, right? Go plate moms. And all of these stories added up and made me think that maybe I should take a break. That maybe I should put this calling on pause and be mama, which I know is the right decision for many people, but for me, it felt so wrong. And in a moment of desperation, asking what I should do, suddenly I realized maybe I needed to find a good story. Were there any good stories? And you know what? There's a whole bunch of them. One of them stood out.